This is the Convene podcast. My name is Maggie, digital media editor. Welcome to another episode of the Convene Talk. I wanted to bring back a topic we started a few weeks ago on convention centers. Our original discussion touched on the New York Times article from November, which questioned why cities are still spending on convention centers. The author said that cities are spending more than ever to land the biggest events, but companies have long pulled back on spending for annual conferences and attendance has dwindled. However, our argument was that convention centers are important as they become part of the fabric of the city, while also they have a way of introducing meeting participants to the city and thus offset for the costs associated with their upkeep. And now that we are back from convening leaders in Houston, I wanted to ask you, what were your observations, and has your mind changed in any way since the last time we addressed the topic? Anyone want to kick it off?
This is Michelle. I can recall going to, and I don't know how many years ago it was, being at the George R. Brown Convention Center and just seeing this vast expanse of nothingness outside the doors. It was either a parking lot or it was just paved over. And it was just remarkable going to convening leaders to see how Discovery Green is really a part of the community and vibrant. So you could look out the window during the conference and you could see people ice skating on the rink. You could see people and, families with strollers walking through the walkway. It just was it was obviously a vibrant part of the community, which is what I think has been the trend in recent years. Certainly the Dallas Convention Center with actually the Kay Bailey Hutchinson Convention Center in Dallas has really big plans to renovate and add on to the existing convention center, but it's also the plan involves becoming more residential in terms of attracting people, making it walkable, making it more of like a district is I think what we've heard from other destinations call that neighborhood in the community. It's a district with, restaurants and attractions and just things that make the convention center feel like it's a hub in a community. So that has struck me. I also take issue with the idea that all conventions are dwindling. That's certainly not what we've heard. Where we've heard in certain instances of meetings surpassing their 2019 attendance levels, or just, showing that there's more of an uptick toward those levels, because that's a lot to recover. This was an industry that was decimated during the pandemic, and it takes a while to work back up to those levels. And things there have been changes in society and expectations. So it felt like that article was a little kind of shallow. It didn't really talk to people in the industry. And I think part of that is our own fault. We don't do a really good job of articulating our message in terms of being an economic driver and also being essential to community business, local businesses. What does anybody else think? A lot of people nodding.
Yeah, you make me remember I was recently in Seattle and they have built a new addition to their convention center campus. It's called the Summit. And on the ground floor, it's completely open to the public. They have restaurants that open out into the street. It's in the middle of downtown Seattle. They call that ground floor the mixing zone, which is where community and the participants in conventions are mixing together. That story to me seemed like it was reflecting something that I think is really the past, which is when convention centers were built more like kind of fortresses to keep people out with big blank walls, and you couldn't even find the door, and it was locked if you could find the door. And that is not the reality now. convention center design has changed so much to open up the center. I just pulled up a page, and when you talk about the benefit to cities, this new summit in Seattle was a $2 billion building, but there were 93 million of that funding went back into the city for improving public spaces. They have public artworks. The convention center has regular tours of the almost $2 million in public art that's there. It's just a different model than it used to be. I just recently saw data from a company called Placer AI about convention center patterns, and they recognize that overall, from the peak of 2019, it's down about 10%. But one of the places that convention center traffic is moving, the needle's going up, is on weekend visits and community visits. And I think that that's an evolution. Not every city and every convention center is connected with the community, but I think some of the most successful convention centers in the country are. Casey, what's on your mind?
Thanks, Barbara. What you were just talking about the, very close link between the community and, weekend events and convention centers made me think of research I found for our trends forecast last year, which talked a lot about leisure, the combination of business and leisure travel. And 67% of leisure trips actually start with a conference on the itinerary. So I think it's important to note in this conversation that convention centers are often kind of the gateway for new visitors to visit a city and then stay longer because they want to see the sights while they're in town. And we're seeing that as a trend that continues to tick up. People want to be able to make a trip out of their business trip for personal reasons or bring their family. And I think that's really a post-pandemic trend that kind of supports the importance of convention centers in the community. Jen?
Oh, I was just gonna say that's a great stat. And I felt like, reading that article, the first part of it where he's trying to drive home this point that meetings have disappeared and no one's going to meetings anymore. And I'm like, where is he getting this from? Because I am seeing the opposite. I mean, we run a lot of stories about research about the industry, about business travel in general, and I can, pull a couple of stats that show the exact opposite. And I'm sure there are parts of the meetings industry that are showing a decline, maybe in certain types of meetings. But everything that I'm seeing is pointing in the opposite direction. We are seeing a slow build back. And yes, things look different, things are changing, but by no means are meetings going away. So I'll actually pull out one of those stats because I thought it was a really good one. This is actually from the trends report that we did in November. This is from the Global Business Travel Association Business Travel Index Outlook that was released in, I believe, like late 2024. And they said that when asked about their most recent business trip, the most common purpose of travel among all global business travelers is attending seminars and training, followed by conventions and conferences, all of which are held in convention centers all over the world. So yeah, I was just super disappointed by this article. It just kind of, built itself on a faulty premise. And like you said earlier, there's just not a whole lot to go off of. But I think something that we are seeing change more and more and more, and I don't think this is necessarily new. I think this has been going on for a while, is like we're definitely seeing convention centers change in terms of how they're designed and their size. I feel like a lot of times when I'm seeing new convention centers being built, they might not be, 2.1 million square feet, like the Orange County Convention Center in Orlando. It's true, there's not a lot of conventions out there that can, meet or fill that entire space. But I feel like we are seeing more and more facilities that are smaller, maybe a little bit more tailored to the types of meetings that are naturally attracted to that destination. So it's not just like one solution anymore. It's not just the same. We're not seeing the same type of facility over and over again. That's what I see when I travel and see convention centers in different cities. I don't know, what you guys are seeing and thinking, but that's kind of, what I've seen in the past few years.
Yeah, and I think he had a lot to say about renovation costs and how are these money being fueled into convention centers and in a way that they disappear and serve no purpose, which I think was wrong. And ever since I've started in the industry 20 years ago, I've seen over and over again articles and stats that prove how much money attendees bring to destinations. So I'm like, I don't get the connection there. There's definitely something missing in that part of his article. And also some of the quotes that he had from people in the industry felt very much taken out of context. Michelle,
Yeah.
what do you think?
I mean, I don't know that we really have insight into the economics of running a convention center. And when you say it lost millions, but how was that offset by the economic activity in the rest of the destination? Is there any analysis of how many hotel rooms were filled, how the restaurants ran, Uber, Uber and taxis and all of the other stuff? It's like that what did not seem to be accounted for. So is it a loss leader in some destinations, like when you go to Costco and you can get a rotisserie chicken for $4.99, but you end up spending, hundreds in the rest of the store? I don't know if that's a viable model, and I think it depends on the destination. But that seemed, as you said, Maggie, to be missing from the reporting of this story. Barbara?
One thing I'm thinking about is the fact that these are such large buildings, expensive to run, and convention centers, people would not expect this. They really are leaders in sustainability. Like many of them are, they're really trying to get their costs down. They are for reasons of responsibility, really leaders in cutting down on food waste and it's a place where you can really scale the impact of sustainable measures. So I think that they look like, you could make it look like a big drain, but on the other hand, there are, it's public space that's being used in a very sustainable manner in many cases.
And that just brought the image of Vancouver Convention Center right into my head because so integrated with the environment, with the green roof and just overseeing the water is, first of all, it's so beautiful. And second of all, super sustainable. There were a lot of lessons that they passed on to the attendees when I was there. The early 2020, right before everything got closed for an IAPCO annual meeting. And it's not a big event, it's like 100 something people. And still, why not utilize a convention center? And I did not feel lost. They had other events running in the meantime. So it was also a good showcase of how other events are using their premises and how they're recycling and the other programs that they are running, which I felt was great. Yeah, Barbara?
Yeah, to me, just a key word is warmth. I think that's what you see in some of the newer designed buildings that have a lot of, natural light and art and elements. I did find the story in New York Times that one of the most impactful things were the images that they showed, just a lone chair in a cavernous room. It kind of reminded me of like abandoned Ellis Island. And I think that you certainly can find that. You can find an empty exhibit hall, but that's not the whole picture.
That picture is actually hilarious, Barbara. I just pulled that up.
There are a couple of them like
Very
that.
dramatic.
Yeah.
I just, like Maggie and Jen have said, I feel like the author kind of has a faulty premise here. I was also a bit surprised that he mentioned remote gatherings are becoming more standard, and that's a reason why convention centers aren't doing as much business. I just, based on the people we speak with, that's not true at all. Most of them do not have either the funding or the staffing to run hybrid conferences. It's very difficult to run a digital and in-person event at the same time. And most planners really don't want to go all digital. If they can, they want it to be in person and have been doing so, since partway through the pandemic. As soon as we were able to meet again, people were meeting again. So I think that's kind of another faulty premise for this article. Michelle?
I found it ironic that it's the New York Times and they should have looked at the Javits Center, because that to me is a really shining example of a convention center that has become more a part of the community and has a green roof. And now there's a subway stop there. It used to be when you went to the Javits Center, you had a hard time finding a cab because it was just sort of this like pocket of New York City that was empty. But now there's a whole community that's been built up around it. And they've done things to help, to Barbara's point about being green. So the green roof, and then also the windows is where birds would go to die. They would just crash into those windows. And they changed all of the windows so that doesn't happen anymore. So like they could have looked in their own backyard, these writers, because I do think the Javits Center is just a shining example.
It's also connected to the High Line, which is this urban park that's built on abandoned freight lines that used to take all the freight into the meatpacking district. And it is just wonderful, packed place to not only just enjoy the art and the greenery on the pathway itself, but every few blocks there's a way down. You can go to Chelsea, you can go all the way down to the meat packing district. It goes to art museums, and so I think that's a really, really good example of evolution.
Yeah, and as a person who grew up with a convention center right in the center of my city, I've always had it as part of, I've seen it as part of the community. There's always things happening there for the community and not only big events. And also now in new parts of the city, we have new convention centers popping up, and they're really revitalizing those parts of the city. They're making them matter, and we see a lot of new things popping around them just because, first of all, the convention center was built there. So it's really, a narrow point of view for this author of the article. And I hope they'll actually get to hear our podcast and rethink their next write-up of a story.
Follow-up story, yes.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Come on and talk about it with us.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you all for the great discussion. As usual, you'll find all the links in the show notes. If you enjoyed this episode, do give us a 5-star review and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. For more industry insights, visit pcma.org/convene. Stay inspired, keep inspiring, and until next time.